Hi, good afternoon, students. Please confirm if I'm audible.
Yes, so you know,
Great. So we'll start with today's session. In last session, we had looked at the essentials of law of talk. If there are any questions or confusions or observations pertaining to that, then I can open with taking those questions. Mhm. So Anushka has a question. So if a person enters a clearly marked and a dangerous construction area knowing that it was dangerous, later, after entering, he died by a negligent act of a worker. Is the company liable? Okay. So here, Anushka, the concept that you are trying to ask is, if I can name the concept is contributory negligence. Now, contributory negligence, if you look at the word itself, it gives you an indication as to why it captures the situation that you are telling. Contributory negligence would be a situation where a person suffers because of a negligent act by another, but there is an element of negligence that has also contributed to to what falls on that person. Just to give you another example, which can come under contributory negligences, that a suppose a person boards a bus and the person boards a bus and the bus is being driven in a very negligent manner by the driver, which is that the bus driver is driving rashly, is overtaking in a dangerous manner. But in that, suppose if the person who is also sitting in the bus has his arms out, has his arms out of the window, or his arms are hanging out of the window, and he has not kept his arms inside. And while the bus driver is trying to overtake another vehicle in a very rash manner, uh, the elbow of the person which is hanging outside of the bus, it brushes against the overtaking vehicle and the person is injured. Now, in this case, what would happen is that the negligence which is there on part of the bus company or the bus driver is will be accounted for, but the compensation that would be given will be significantly reduced if the bus driver also says that there has been a negligence on part of the person also who has boarded the bus, along with the negligence on part of the bus driver. So if they say that the person has also contributed to the injury that has suffered, in addition to uh, the injury that has in addition to negligence of the bus driver, then that will have an impact on significantly reducing the damages or the compensation that would be given to the person who is boarding the bus, who has boarded the bus. So if I apply this concept in your situation, which is that if a person is if a person enters an area which is marked and is a dangerous construction, so the person should have been either, even if the person, if the person has not accounted for the fact that the situation, that the place where he is entering is a dangerous place, and uh, on addition, if something happens uh, in that dangerous place which also leads to that injury being happened, then also they, because there was negligence involved on both sides, which has resulted in injury, or which has resulted in damage being done to the person who has entered that space, then the then the owner of that dangerous place will be liable, but his liability will be significantly reduced. For instance, let me give you an example. Now, suppose a person enters a certain kind of factory where uh, where some kind of chemicals are being produced, and there are instructions given there on how a person should behave. If another person, if a person is entering that industrial complex where dangerous uh, industrial chemicals are being produced, and if it says that everyone has to wear mask, and if the person has not wore mask, but in addition to that, suppose if a person is has entered there and there is a certain kind of blast that happens in that industrial space. Now, blast is something that is normally not supposed to happen. It has happened because of malfunctioning of equipments there. Then the fact that a person suffered damages, and the person suffered damages to a tune which was more, because the person was not wearing mask even if there was an explosion. An explosion was something which was not supposed to happen in the normal course of operation of that industrial complex. Then in that case, the other side, which is that the owner of the industrial complex can also allege that the compensation that the person is supposed to pay to the person will be reduced to the extent that the person who suffered injury also contributed to his or her damage, because the person was not wearing a mask. So if there has been negligence on both sides, but then that does not mean that it becomes an exception and there would be no liability that would be imposed on that. It will have an impact on the amount of compensation that the person will receive. So is it clear?
Yes.
Great. Vaidehi has a question. Yes, Vaidehi, you have your hand raised. Please go ahead. Okay. If Vaidehi is able to hear me, then please go ahead with your question. You have your hand raised. Meanwhile, you have a follow-up question. Is a person liable for a crime that is physically or legally impossible to do? Okay. Can you give an example, Anushka, of what you are trying to say? Anushka? So I'll try.
Hello. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, so sir, I had a similar question.
Hmm.
Supposing A enters territory which is clearly marked off as restricted and is being used as a gun training area for people who are about to enter the army.
Hmm.
So supposing A enters his territory
Hmm.
and B is a student who is training, who is practicing how to wield a gun or some other type of weapon,
Hmm.
and sees A and intentionally shoots A.
Hmm.
Now, is their fault on A's part or B's part or both of their parts? Because it is, let's just assume that it is possible to prove that B shot A on purpose.
Hmm. So there also it will depend on if depends on the skill set that the lawyer is getting to the case. Let me tell you. I- Can you hear me?
Have averted the situation. B saw that person.
Hmm. So suppose, let me tell you, if there is a lawyer for the person who is owning the, if someone is a lawyer for a person who is owning that shooting range, then what they can say is that it is clearly said that this is a restricted area. If this is a restricted area, then it can be a private complex. If this is a private complex, then they can say that they have a right against being trespassed on their land. So if a person, after reading that sign, ventures into that land, and the person is saying that I shot that person because I thought that the person was a trespasser, and there is trespass to land, a person is and if the person who was shot at because the owner of the gun shooting range thought that the person was a trespasser, and it was not just a negligent act, that if it is a restricted area which is in a sensitive area, then they thought that the person is an intruder and they shot that person, then one can say that there is no liability. I am telling you the different ways in which one can argue. There is no one way. So if you frame it as a question of trespass over land, where warning had been given that no person is allowed without authorization, and if the person enters that unauthorized space with a gun, then if a person is shot at, then the person will say that there is no liability because the action was taken against a trespasser. Now the other thing that is there is, uh, the other situation that can be there is that a defense of volunty non-fit injuria can also be made to say that there is no liability. That situation would mean that if it is a gun shooting range where unauthorized access is not allowed and still a person enters, then in that situation, if there is likelihood that that the person who got injured put himself in that situation where there was a likely chance of being injured, because this is a gun shooting area, and if a person is not very careful about where gunfire is coming from, then the natural course of thing is that this is a defense because the nature of the land was such where these dangers are expected. Now the third situation could be on part of the person who got injured, and if he has to claim damages, then that person will say that even if I was a trespasser, then also uh, there could have been other reasonable ways of punishing me or taking action against me rather than shooting at me. So it was a use of excessive force. The person can also claim that voluntary non-fit injuria will not apply because voluntary non-fit injuria means that the injury that has been suffered was not intended by the it was not intended by the perpetrator, but it was something which was natural or which was foreseeable because the person entered in that space. And in that situation, if a person but this is a situation where a person took deliberately, uh, uh, a person took deliberate aim at a person who was entering the. And in this situation, this was that that this was a situation where uh, this was a situation where liability has to be fixed because this was done intentionally, and there was excessive use of force in killing that person and or in injuring that person. For instance, one can say that if someone is entering someone's space and it says beware of dog, And if the dog is unleashed, or if the dog is already unleashed, then if a person suffers damages because there is uh, there is a dog who has attacked the trespasser uh, because it was a private property, then there is no liability. Voluntary non-fit injuria will also apply, which means that if one is entering an unauthorized space where a person has kept dogs not on a leash, but without a leash, then these are damages or these are injuries which have been suffered in natural course. But the difference is that if one says that this is a private property, and if a person enters and sees that the dog is on a leash, and on seeing the person who is unarmed, the dog is unleashed and the dog attacks that person, then that person can claim damages on intent, saying that this was not an injury that was suffered in the natural course of things, because the person intended me to suffer in this manner. And in tort, if injury is done deliberately, then there has to be compensation for it. Because what does law of tort tell you? Law of tort tells you not of a situation where deliberate injury will be done. Law of tort is a situation where even if you have right over your land, and therefore you have a right against trespass, or there is a defense that one can invoke of voluntary non-fit injuria, the recourse in these situations is to seek damages from the person who has violated your space, or you refusing to not or you refusing to not give compensation because by invoking this defense. But if a person does something deliberately as a response to the trespass, then the remedy is in awarding of compensation or seeking compensation. But if a person has acted in a retaliatory manner, then this is the situation that will be covered under the tort of assault or battery. Assault or battery would mean that if anyone is uh, if anyone is uh, causing harm to a person by force or by using some kind of force, then the person who has of using of that kind of force can also seek compensation. So what I have told you, that there are three ways in which this can be looked at. The person the person in whose property the person whose property rights was violated can claim that this was a private property and a dangerous private property, and this was expected, that in a firing range, if that there's a possibility of that person getting injured. But if the person who got injured is able to show that the person did that wrong deliberately, then that person can invoke tort of assault or battery to say that this kind of injury that happened was deliberately done to to teach that person a lesson, and therefore there is that recourse. Is it clear?
Yes, sir, I got it. Thank you.
Okay. So Anushka has another question. If a person A is intending to shoot a person who he thinks is in bed, shoot a person B who he thinks is in bed B, and shoots, but the person B is actually not in bed. No. So the claim that you are saying is this, that if a person wants to kill another person, and the person thinks that the person is lying in a bed, but the bed is empty, and the person still goes and fires at an empty bed, then if the person is still liable for intending to murder B. Now this is a situation where uh, one has to look at the question of attempt, not intending to murder, which is that, can you say that because B is not killed, if B is not killed, then one can't be booked for killing B. But what A can be booked for is an attempt to murder B. attempt to murder B does not mean that the B has to be injured. It has to be that if shots were fired, and if one can prove that the shots were fired at B, or thinking that B is to be found in that place, then even if B is unscarred, or B is does not suffer injury, then also this kind of attempt to commit murder is something that can be invoked. An attempt to commit murder is something that involves lesser punishment. An interesting example would be this. Let me tell you, and this can be more thought provoking. Suppose a person goes to a shop and wants to buy a rat poison to poison another person. Now, the person goes to a shop, pays for rat poison, but what the person gets is a poison which is expired, or which is ineffective, or it is a case of false branding. There is no poison in that. And if the person gives that to the person who who is being in who uh, who is being intended to be killed, definitely it has no effect on the person, because the person mixed it in the food of the person thinking it to be poison, but later on it turned out that there were no poison traces in that. Then also the person cannot be booked for obviously murder, but the person can still be booked for attempt to commit murder, because attempt to commit murder has to do with your mental state. And if even if that is an attempt that has failed not because the person wanted it to fail, it has failed because of some because of the poison being ineffective, then also the person can be booked for murder. It's a similar situation, can be booked for attempt to murder. It's a similar situation that suppose a person uh, buys a gun, and the person trains the gun to a person that he wants to be killed, but the gun doesn't work at the right time. If the weapon does not work at the right time, and therefore the person is unable to hurt that person, then also that person can be arrested for attempt to murder. This is a situation where the person attempted, but the attempt failed because of some reason. So the example that you have given, is it clear? So moving on, yeah, Chaitanya.
Sir, I actually wanted to discuss like a few things about the two hypotheticals you just gave now.
Yeah,
Sir, in the first hypothetical, you said that poison was added, but it didn't really work at killing people, work in whatever it was meant for because it was expired or some other reason.
yeah.
First of all, sir, if poison was added and didn't work, so there has to be some kind of symptom that should be related to poisoning that indicates that a person has been poisoned. Then after that, when the person is taken to the hospital for having any of the symptoms, then the doctor diagnoses that this person has had this poison, and he or she underlines the sources. I didn't really get how that would be condemned for attempted murder, because like
Yeah, so
there
my
was no
situation is
effect of
this.
the poison in.
What I have said is this: that is, suppose a person goes to a shop and buys a rat poison, and the person then puts that poison in the food of the person that is intending to kill.
All
But
right.
suppose that poison has no effect, because in later on it is found out that what the person paid for buying a poison, but the person was given s- some kind of concoction that was not poison.
All right, sir.
And therefore I am saying that even if It can happen, no? That a person asks for a poison and something else is given to them in
Yes.
place of poison.
Yes.
And but the person had intention to kill that person, and the person put that thing in the food of the person that is intending to kill.
All,
It is in that situation that I am saying
all
that
right.
even if what was administered was not poison and nothing happened to that person, but if it is brought to the notice that this person had spoken to different people before, or had confided in another person, that he is going to kill this person by poison and is going to put this in his food, and it is also shown that the person went to a shop and the shop owner also said that this person asked for poison and I gave him poison, but the poison is ineffective or the poison has expired, or whatever the shopkeeper thought was poison was given. It is in that situation that I am telling that the person would still be liable for attempt to murder.
All right, sir. So this would all be happening under an FIR, right? First
Y-
information report.
Yes.
So, oh, all right.
Your next question could be that how could all of this thing be known?
Yeah.
This thing is known because a case is not made. A case is made by a lot of other circumstantial evidence.
All right.
Where if there is a CCTV camera where it is shown that the person went to the shop and asked for a poison,
All
and the same thing if it is shown that the same bottle was found uh, from the spot where this was administered to another person,
all
then
right.
these will be taken to be fact. On that basis the person will be prosecuted for attempt to murder. Even if you leave apart his mental element, you will say that the act that the person said
All right.
is impossible in that state to
All right.
have killed a person.
So, sir, for example, if I kind of, if there's some intuition feeling or there's something I got to know that this person tried to poison me, and I go to the police to file an FIR, so will my extreme circumstantial evidence be counted enough to actually like give to actually, I don't know, have an FIR? Because
Yes.
at this point I have zero evidence with me.
No, so FIR, you don't have to bring evidence to file an FIR.
All right.
An FIR is something where you are raising a complaint.
Okay.
Whether that complaint is turned into an FIR will be based on preliminary investigation by the police themselves or preliminary inquiry.
All right.
If you go and say that I have a suspicion that my neighbor is trying to kill me and these are the kind of traps that are being set, or these are some of the situations that has happened in the last 3 or 4 days, and there is a previous enmity between me and him, and I have a feeling that the neighbor is, or my neighbor with whom I have a feud is involved in these things, the
All
police will not tell you. You are not an investigative agency that you bring me proof. If you
right.
can prove that there is that kind of growing continuous animosity, and you have suffered a particular peculiar set of fate in the last 3 or 4 days, then the police will write your complaint,
All
and then the police will do an investigation on their own part, and then you can come and follow up
all
and tell them that I think still my neighbor is involved in that. Registration of an FIR also does not mean that your neighbor will be picked up and
yeah.
will be, it only means that you have filed a complaint against a specific person,
All right.
and the police can then do their investigation, and then the police uh, can then uh, then the police can then choose to stop an investigation and not do anything with your FIR, saying that they have not found any evidence. In that situation, what is the recourse that you have? The recourse that you have is that you can still move directly to magistrate and ask the magistrate that the magistrate directs the police to again open an inquiry
Okay.
against a person because you are not satisfied with that.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Any other question? So we'll spend the next uh, next 10 or 15 minutes discussing the last part of the module, which is on offenses, cyber offenses or offenses under Information Technology Act. And after that, in the last 15 minutes, if you have any questions pertaining to the whole course on, it can be about any specific part that you did not understand, or pertaining to take-home examination, or pertaining to your preparation strategy for getting into law school, then I can answer some of those doubts in the last 10-15 minutes. So, if we look at the last video also, then there's a video in which I had looked at offenses under Information Technology Act, or what are also known as some of these cyber offenses. Now, the offenses that are there that are called as cyber offenses can be found under Information Technology Act of 2000. And this has been done because the presence of electronic equipments, mobiles, tablets, and browsing of net has become ubiquitous in our time. And a lot of damages to or injury to a person can be done with by fiddling with that electronic source, or by using these by using uh, electronic equipment. So I'll first speak with some of the things that you commonly know, and my attempt would be to tell you how the law looks at this. So the first thing is that you must have heard about hacking. N- Now, hacking is a, which in common terms we call as hacking, is also an offense under Information Technology Act. It basically means that if you are fiddling with someone else's computer, source of the computer, or computer source in any particular manner, and if this is an unauthorized access, either where you are entering into someone's uh, email account, or you are using their or you are using their uh, social media accounts, or you are able to break into a secure network, and that is a serious offense under Information Technology Act. That is given under Section 43 of Information Technology Act. Now, so one should not think that law has not caught up. Law has almost caught up with everything that one is doing in an unauthorized way, using computers, or using any electronic resources. And unauthorized access to anyone's computer resource is something that is considered as hacking. Now, hacking is something that is very broadly defined, which is that it is unauthorized usage of someone's social media account, where you are able to break into their where you are able to secure their username and password and are logging in, or if you are able to use that data, which is a secure data, and you are an unauthorized person, then that is also hacking. Hacking is also something that can be done where you are able to decode that program, and you are able to unauthorized break into that system. Now, in certain situations, if it is done at a level where your unauthorized access is is into those secured computer networks, which are critical infrastructure, then this can also come under what is known as cyber terrorism. For instance, if one is able to break into or fiddle with the radar system that is there, and radar system is something that is critical for a country's defense, then in that situation it will not be seen as a simple act of hacking. Then it will be seen in context of you breaking into those critical infrastructure, where your unauthorized access has led to has led to impinging on security. I'll just to give you an example. I think of in sometime in 2006 or 7, there was this virus that was created or malware that was created by these US companies, which and these US companies sold this malware to the US government. And the name of this malware was Stuxnet. Stuxnet, Stunext, and it was deployed against critical infrastructure. It was deployed against those critical infrastructure in Iran, where Iran was trying to develop its own nuclear weapon. And this led to a situation where all of those reactors that were functioning were brought down because of this malware. Now, when it was investigated, it was seen that this was a malware that was deliberately introduced into their systems by some US companies or by some US companies who were delegated the task by the US government. Now, this is a case where this is not a simple case of hacking. This is a case involving involving cyber terrorism. Now, why am I speaking about cyber terrorism? I'm speaking about cyber terrorism because cyber terrorism as an offense has also been added through an amendment under under Information Technology Act. I have given you a more sophisticated version of what would be an example of cyber terrorism. But let me also tell you that if there is a personnel who is working in a critical, who is working in a defense sphere or a critical sphere, and the person is providing is able to access documents which that person should not normally have access to through unauthorized means, and the person has used it uh, or sold it or appropriated it to some other person, then that person can also be brought uh, under the definition of cyber terrorism. Now, another kind of offense that we often hear about is known as identity theft. Identity theft or identity impersonation. Identity theft would mean that if a person is able to secure the digital credentials of another person, it can be their credit account number, it can be their bank account number, it can be uh, uh, it can be the password of their digital payments platform. And if the person is is using it for their own use, then so all of these card frauds and credit card frauds that happen where a, a person's information has been misused by any other person is an example of identity impersonation or identity theft. Now, this is also an offense. And along with it, the usual perils of you of social media which we encounter are also covered under different kind of offenses. So cyberbullying or using morphed images of someone or distorted images of someone without their permission to harm their reputation, or if one is using abusive language on net, then these are also instances of cyberbullying or uh, or cyber fraud, and these also come under the ambit of Information Technology Act. But here I want to segue into a discussion which has gained ground in Information Technology Act. The manner in which we use these platforms or our computer sources has also drastically changed. What has changed is that sometimes we are able to post things and make our views known to the world through the platform of what we call as intermediaries. Intermediaries can be websites that host such information. It can be those platforms that host such information. So in that situation, we have under Information Technology Act, we have specific section dealing with the liability of intermediaries. And these are dealt under specific sections of Information Technology Act and also Intermediary Guideline Rules 2021. Now, what kind of intermediaries I'm talking about? Intermediaries would be all those websites and platforms that one is using, where one can post information, or one can from where one can consume information, from WhatsApp to Facebook to platform X to Amazon to all of these uh, all of these market aggregators which are also using a platform. Now, what the law says is that suppose if I can give the example of Facebook, if someone publishes a material that is derogatory on Facebook, and it has the propensity of hurting a specific person or hurting a specific community, then it says is that there will be liability of the platform which is also hosting that information. And the law on intermediary liability under section 69A and 79A says this, that the state where this offense has been committed, that government can write to the intermediary asking them to take down information within 36 to 72 hours. The time can vary depending on which jurisdiction one is talking about. And if intermediary is able to take down that information within that time period, then that platform will not be held liable along with the person who has committed that, who has posted that information. The intermediary can escape liability if they are able to respond to that takedown notice by the state within the prescribed time. That is also known as the safe harbor provision. But if the intermediary is unable to take down that information from its platform within the prescribed time, then legal action can be taken not only against the person who is the originator of that message or that kind of defamatory information, but also against the platform. So this has come to be known as an intermediary liability, intermediary safe harbor provision, which where the law has progressed to take into account that that it would be futile to only act against the person who has published that information, because that information, if it is not taken down, can reproduce in can reproduce exponentially and spread all over the world, while taking into account how the mode of dissemination has changed drastically, where something that a person says on a mic or something that a person says on a live chat can go viral. So the law had to account for that kind of virality that comes naturally with the media, while also providing for some safeguards, so that intermediaries which are just hosting information and are not abetting that kind of offense are also given some time period to act and take down that information. And in their failure to only act, or in situation of their inability to act and take down information, only in that situation will the intermediaries be held liable. Otherwise, there is a safe harbor provision. Harbor means that if that one can get some kind of immunity uh, if they are an intermediary which is hosting problematic information, if they have been able to take down that information within a reasonable period of time. Now, it goes without saying that sometimes if the state is drawing the line of is drawing the line of curtailment of speech too sharply or too narrowly, then those intermediaries can challenge those kind of instructions by the government in a court, saying that that in their own judgment, in the judgment of the intermediaries, no offense has been committed by the person who has broadcasted that information, or it does not breach the community guidelines that intermediaries have, then that is a matter that the court will decide. But this is the framework of law, that even for information that is being hosted, if that hosting is being done uh, in a manner where the state thinks that some laws have been broken by publishing that information or broadcasting that information, then a reasonable time of 36 to 72 hours is given to those platforms which are hosting those informations to take down that content. And in the failure of those intermediaries to take down that content, the intermediaries also become liable along with the person who has published such information. And action can also be taken against uh, the representative of that platform. So broadly, what we know is that under Information Technology Act, some of the offenses relating to sources, unauthorized uh, some of the offenses that some of the acts that qualify as offenses under Information Technology Act will be in nature where there is an unauthorized break-in into a computer source or a computer system, which is known as hacking. If hacking is done of critical infrastructure, and hacking is to be seen in a broad manner, where even if there is introduction of malware, or if there is leaking of sensitive information without access to a third person, then that can come under the definition of cyber terrorism. Then sometimes if the digital profile, or if the digital credentials of a person are misused, then that can come under identity impersonation or identity theft. That is also an offense. If someone is misusing the platform of computer to intimidate someone, to stalk someone, to bully someone, then these are also considered as offenses. One does not have to do it physically, because one is looking at the mental toll that is taking on the person who is subjected to all of these. So all of these actions, which is from trolling to cyber stalking to sending unsolicited messages to someone, to sending threats to someone, is taken under the definition of, or is also considered as offenses. And the last part that we did was had to do with intermediary liability, that the platforms that are also hosting some of the problematic content will also be held liable if they are unable to take down that information within a prescribed period of time under the law. So if you have any questions pertaining to uh, offenses against under Information Technology Act, then please go ahead. So we have completed our 8 weeks of classes. So now is the time for anyone to ask questions pertaining to the course or pertaining to the preparation strategy for entering into law school. I'd be happy to take those questions. Okay. Anushka has a question. Can you share some strategies to crack CLAT? So always the first thing that it has been a long time for me since I uh, entered law school through the competitive examinations, but some things, some fundamentals remain constant. I'll tell you the strategy that has to be that the, so if one is speaking about a preparation strategy, there are some things which will always remain constant. And then there are some things which will change depending on how the question paper has evolved over the year. And then there is a third part is where some people have individual strengths and they would want to take into account what their strengths are and prepare accordingly. Now, I will speak about some of the essentials that can be applied acontextually without context in all examinations, specifically in class, and where these are some of the common mistakes that people do. One thing is, the first thing that you should do is that you should look at the past year question paper for the last 8 or 10 years, and then figure out that if there are different areas of assessment, which are those areas of assessment. So don't start blank with, don't get the books and then start preparing. The first thing that you should do for a week or so, or 10 days or 15 days, is to study the question paper, and seeing that if a question paper has 5 component, each component that is there is tethered to a particular time. Because if you have 2 hours, then you have to also judge your strength, that if comprehension, if reading comprehension in a quick manner is your strength, then you, that is your strength, not because you can answer all questions. It is your strength because you have the ability to answer those questions in the least amount of time. So always remember that time factor is a very important factor. So the first thing is that you have to study past year question paper. And secondly, then you have to, depending on what are your strengths, which are your moderate areas, which are your weaknesses, and no matter, everyone who is writing the exam, the people, the top 100, 150 people who will be entering the best law school, are also the people who will have these strengths and weaknesses. What they do is that they start working very clinically on what their strengths are, and they try to see that something which is their weakness is not able to bring them down. So the purpose is that they work on their weakness also, so that the weakness can become a thing in which they can be average or moderate. So you have to work with that strategy. You are not studying. Let me also tell you something about competitive exam. Competitive exam is not something that you prepare for your love for the subject. This is true for CLAT, this is true for IIM, this is true for UPSC all examination. You do it for the sole purpose that there is an exam to be cracked. So this would also mean that you should choose your sources very, in you should spend some time in choosing your sources. You should look at that. You should not practice logical reasoning from 5 different sources. That is useless. You should look at which is a good source, which are the sources that people who have done well are recommending, and you should try and practice it and improve your timing. Similarly, if you're practicing mathematical ability, then you should practice it from that particular kind of either test paper or books. And the attempt is to practice it so much that it becomes your second nature. A lot of times, what the people who crack examinations, because cracking competitive examination, I have realized, is a different skill set from doing really well in school. Because what is required in a competitive examination of this nature is your ability to hold your nerves. And your ability to hold your nerves is not an intrinsic ability, is an ability that comes with more and more practice, with more and more practicing of narrow set of areas. That is what I said. Rather than doing maths or comprehension from 5 different spaces, because what you will do is you will spend the equal time, but you will not get that confidence. So the first thing is to have a framework as to which kind of comprehension one is practicing. Let me give you an example. When I was doing comprehension, I can tell you that there's some kind of comprehensions that I could read very well, because it paired very well with my own interests. So anything, when I was in law school, also preparing for law school, anything that had to do with if there was a passage on, say, if there was a passage which dealt with a social commentary or a political commentary, then I could read it in a very comprehensive manner quickly. But I realized that my ability to read comprehensions that deal with dense uh, passages on science and technology, or on economics, or on literary criticism, where my reading speed decreased. So the way I practice, I still remember 15, 20, 15 years back, is that I first and I analyze that if a comprehension comes on in my zone, which is where one is it is dealing with a social issue or a political issue, then I don't need, I can do it well. But my ability to have enough background information about a scientific discovery that has happened, and if there is a passage pertaining to how a particular discovery happened, which would mean that there would be some kind of technical jargon which can throw me off, or if there is a piece on evolution, or if there is a piece on monetary policy, or if there is a piece on literary criticism, then I started practicing with those passages, because I realized that in that exam, if I have 15 minutes to deal with 4 or 5 comprehensions, even if 3 or 4 comprehensions comes from a field which is outside my field, then my reading speed, if it is not the same as what I would have if I'm reading a political or a social piece, then also I have to improve it. And so I practice with those unfamiliar passages, and you will realize that with constant practice, which is you're practicing half an hour for every day, you will see that you will become, there will be a certain kind of comfort that will come with that kind of passages also. Maybe it will not turn into your strength, but you will see that you are becoming better at that. So that is how one prepares for an examination. It is not because I was very happy to read scientific passages. I read it because I knew this is an exam where if they want to test who has the ability to read comprehension in one go. The other thing that I also realized is that if time is of essence, this means that even if I am reading it slowly, I have to read comprehension in one go. And then if I'm reading the question, then I should not go back to the passage, because then I'm wasting time. So it is not only about accuracy, but it is about reasonable accuracy in time. So I trained my mind in that manner that I am reading the passage, but if there are 6 questions following from that passage, then I am going to choose the options without ever going back to passage. Because going back to passage again will mean that I'm losing 30 seconds. Similarly, if I am practicing analytical reasoning or analogy or some kind of deductive reasoning, then also you know that there are 5 or 6 different kinds ways in which reasoning can be tested. So I knew that I had my strengths, but there's some areas which were not my strengths. So I only practiced that. Similarly, if there is objective GK, then I would limit my sources and try and go deep from a particular book or a newspaper. Another thing is that you don't read from 4 newspapers. That is a waste of time. You are not doing it for the enjoyment of it. What you should do is that one should be clinical about it. Take one newspaper and be thorough with it. And why are you doing it? And with all of this, the purpose is to keep taking the mock examination. And in that, you have to be very strict about time, which is you have to give, if the exam is for 2 hours, you have to give yourself 1 hour, 50 minutes. And then keep on practicing that. And the mock paper that you have solved or on which you have been assessed is useless unless you have spent double the time analyzing the mistakes that you have done, and give yourself time to then work on that. Some of the things that can be really frustrating for students, but it is essential, is that you think that these are reading skill set or comprehension. These are skill sets that are developed over a period of time. So if the gain is that small, is it worthwhile to invest in doing those small changes? There I'll say that yes, it is worthwhile, because this examination is an examination of nerve. If there are 100 or 150 people who get selected, let me tell you, the top 1,000 people who are there, no, will almost be in the same league. But the difference that is there is their ability to absorb that kind of pressure. And ability to absorb that kind of pressure is something that is also something that one practices by doing continuous work, by continuously working on the exam pattern. One is also doing by putting oneself in unfamiliar positions, because your confidence and your nerve is not given to you. It is something that is socially inculcated. And your preparation, your ability to be thorough is what gives one confidence that I have done my part. Even if you are very intelligent, if you think that you have cut corners in your preparation, you will be very tentative before the examination. And these are things that then lead to you committing those 5 or 6 silly mistakes. So the three things that I'll tell you is a time bound examination. So your preparation strategy has to be in determining what is your strength is, also determining that which are areas where you are comfortable with, and you think that you can solve those questions in a quick pace. If you are not able to solve those, then look at the question papers and prepare accordingly, so that you become better one day at a time. The second thing is that you should take mock tests. And in mock test, the most important thing is that you have to sit, go back to your table, and then prepare again and look at your mistakes. So you have to approach this exam as a very, very clinical thing. And the third thing is, don't spread your sources too much. You are not writing a paper, or you are not writing a novel where you will draw from everything. The best people are the people who have spent a lot of time in choosing their sources from where they will prepare, in choosing that kind of coaching where they will go. It is better to spend 30-40% of your time doing that than reading from different sources and being not being able to revise. It is more important to revise, to choose your sources and revise it 5 times in terms of general knowledge, than to read 5 things once and not revise. Because all of this is related to, and I can't stress this enough, is your ability to soak in pressure and to feel confident on that day. Because a large part of this, 10-15 part of this is your ability to feel confident on that day. And that can only come with clinical preparation. So this is all that I had to say. If there are any questions, then please feel free to ask me. Okay. So this concludes our session, and it was a pleasure interacting with all of you. And as a take home, let me also tell you that as part of the code assessment component of this code, you are required to also take a take home examination. The take home, I think, will have 4 questions, and you have to attempt one out of these 4. What I'm looking for is, if it is a hypothetical, I'm looking for you to resolve that question in an intelligent legal manner, which will you will tell me what are the legal provisions that are there, what is the question that it raises, and how will you decide it on the basis of those principles. So I'm also looking for a certain kind of logical structure in how you are reasoning. Reasoning means that there is a way in which one has to reason in a logical manner. So you'll be tested on that. If they're theoretical questions, then you are required to do your own reading around it and frame it. And always remember that if one is using copy pasting or using it or writing your answers from AI resources, that is unethical and that is intellectual theft. So one will fail that, and I have reasons to find out. So I have sources. What is valued is in answer is your thoughtful exposition in your own words. So don't think that if I'm writing in this manner, this will come across as non-serious. No, that individuality is what fetches you mark. Any reading that you have to do before attempting an answer, you do it prior to that. Because if you are pasting someone else's answer as your own answer, then that is malpractice. And so with this, I'll end today's session and thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.